Hello, everyone. This is Ralph Fusatola, co-host of the Dr. Rima Reports. This is a pre-recorded interview taking place on January 5, 2012. We have as our guest, and it is our great honor to have as our guest, Foster Gamble, producer of the epic movie Thrive, which I'm sure many of you in this audience have seen, and if you haven't, you need to see it. Foster is the scion of a famous American family. He turned from the dark side that sometimes such families embrace, and has for decades been a light, a shining light in many, many areas of interest. In fact, 20 years and a few months ago, Dr. Rima and General Burt met each other at an event held in California that Foster sponsored. And so some amazing things have come about as a result of that meeting, which might not have otherwise happened. Foster Gamble, we welcome you to the Dr. Rima Reports, and it's such a pleasure to have you here. And by the way, folks, this interview will be broadcast on January the 8th as part of our annual trustees meeting war council. Foster, hello.
Hello, Ralph. Thanks for having me on. It's really a great privilege and an honor for me to be part of the conversation of your community, because I've been a long-time fan of the Natural Solutions Foundation, and I'm just so proud of the work that you're doing for health, food, and so much of what's critical for not only the surviving, but as we would say, the thriving of humanity right now. So thanks for having me on.
That phrase, not just surviving, but thriving, has reverberated for quite a few months in our minds, ever since the initial trailers for Thrive came out, and my son and others immediately pointed us at them, and we began to see that there is really hope for humanity. So often, especially those of us who are advocates for social change, so often we see all the problems. General Burt, for example, has identified for us these technologies, these genocidal technologies that are weaponizing the world against human survival. And we see these terrible things. We see the children who are being harmed by the vaccines. We see the fields of GMO food that are failing. And we really have great fear for the future. And it's so important, therefore, for someone to come along, as you and all the extraordinary people on that movie did, and actually tell us that we can survive, that we can thrive, that the natural state of humanity is to thrive. And that is such a powerful message that, I don't want to keep talking about it. I want you to talk about it. Please tell us a little bit about the people who are in the movie, why you made it, how it came about. We want to know all the details.
Well, when I was younger, Ralph, I was trained at one point in advanced driving, fast, like race course type driving. And one of the key things that I was taught was that the further you can look into the curve when you're going around a corner, the more you'll be able to coordinate the movement of your vehicle. And so when it came time to name our project, to name our movie, I remembered that, and I thought, okay, what's the furthest that I can look into this particular curve? And if I had to boil it down to one word, what would that be? And the word was clear for both my wife, Kimberly, and me. It was thrive. And I think that if we're focused on going there, then it makes it a lot easier to have the momentum and clarity in getting from here to there, because it helps us coordinate the movement of our vehicle. And rather than just be satisfied with sustaining or recovering or restoring, a flower was not meant to just make it through. It was meant to flourish. And humanity also was designed to thrive. And in every cell of our body, that's what's wanted. So when we're not, it's really useful to recognize that there must be something in the way, whether it's the health of your cells or the health of your economy or media system or medical system or whatever. And that really inspired us to for me to take decades and look and see, okay, what is in the way of our thriving? Because it doesn't seem to me that the so-called adults in charge either are doing a very good job or know what they're doing.
I see. Yes, indeed. as one of the adults not in charge, I can see what's been happening. You know, we interact with decision makers all the time. As an NGO, we don't engage in lobbying, of course, but we do engage in educating decision makers. And on a few occasions, millions of people have joined us in educating decision makers, and they've changed the way the system's structured. For example, back in 2009, during the swine flu vaccine panic, 3.5 million messages went through our Educate Decision Makers system to members of Congress, members of state legislators, and other decision makers, basically saying, we will not take this unproven, unsafe swine flu vaccine. And that pushback was so powerful that the government's plan, which was, it spent $6.4 billion buying the entire output of 5 drug companies for their swine flu vaccines, and then it approved those vaccines, and then it recommended the vaccines, and then it began to distribute them. And in that approval process, it spoke out of both sides of its mouth. It said, on one hand, this is a novel virus with pandemic potential, and on the other side of its mouth, it said, this is just a change of strain, and we don't have to test it for safety. People became so outraged by that they simply refused to cooperate. And as a result, the entire scheme collapsed. And of course, from our holistic viewpoint, it is the vaccine that triggers the pandemic, and so there was no pandemic. But that's the type of human action, coordinated human action that we've seen in the past that I hope will lead us to thrive. And how can we thrive in a world, and here are the tough questions, how can we thrive in a world in which Fukushima continues to spew out radiation, and the government of Japan's response to that was, to slaughter all the cattle within the danger zone and then feed the meat to the school children? How do we deal with a world in which the authorities are willing to literally use our bodies as dumps for radioactive and toxic materials? And that is one of the issues that we've been facing. And of course, as I said, I want to be optimistic, but I have great trepidation when it comes to these technologies. You know what they are. They are technologies that release ionizing radiation, technologies that put toxins into our environment and into our bodies. They are technologies that create novel proteins without ever taking a look at what those proteins might do. And we need to know, how do we overcome that? How do we get beyond that? And that's something that your movie helps us do. And I
think that's a really powerful question. And one of the things that my wife suggested very strongly as we were creating our website is to have success stories available by the click of a tab from every single page, because they not only inform us, they inspire us. And frankly, when that whole swine flu vaccine thing was going down, and not only states but countries were threatening to make it mandatory and all that kind of stuff, what you did in your organization of sleuthing out the truth and then using the internet to connect thousands or millions of people to take action, I think was a key player in at least nullifying that one for then. Obviously, they're coming back with lots of different, slightly altered strains of strategies, as well as flus to continue the intention there. But the model that you guys created for effective action, I think, is one example of what we can do. And out here in California, when they tried to spray 7 million people in the Monterey and San Francisco Bay areas with these cancer-causing toxins
Yeah, we were very aware of that. That spraying to get rid of a pesky moth that wasn't even harmful.
Yeah, it was causing no damage, and they started spraying us with this secret soup that included endocrine disruptors and cancer-causing agents. When we finally got Schwarzenegger to stop the thing at least long enough to make the company reveal what they were spraying us with. And given the research that I had done, I could sense that it was probably part of a much larger agenda than some little harmless moth. And so I immediately started following the money on that. And it led back to a specific earmark from George Bush Jr. And of $300 million to spray this area.
Huh.
And so it went through got the money from Homeland Security, went through the California Department of Food and Agriculture, and they just started doing this to us. So we gathered people from our community who were kind of running around in a panic trying to do something. We gathered them literally in our living room and introduced them to what we call the 12-sector model, which is on our website, which basically divides human activity into 12 different sectors. And that's, science and media and health and economics and so forth. And then is centered by one called worldview. But if when we're dealing with one sector, we're aware that it's part of a whole system with all of the other sectors, then not only does it keep you thinking in terms of whole systems, but also for activism, it's really powerful for organizing. So what we did after the meeting here, after we introduced people to that, was we had a town hall meeting with a different sign-up table for each of the sectors. So people who were doctors who were concerned would come forward with the health part, and environmentalists, and lawyers, and economists, and business people, and artists, and so forth, would come forward and contribute where their expertise and passion was, knowing that the other areas were being handled by others.
That's
long
brilliant.
and short of it is that in 6 months, we ended up organizing effectively enough throughout the Bay Area that they had to stop that effort.
Right. In fact, we were also telling people about that.
With some new strategies and so forth. But both your effort with the vaccines and our effort with these sprays are examples of how powerful it is if people use the communication tools that we have to find out the truth, to link up, and then to get out the truth and organize the activism. And I think that's the model. And we're seeing
fantastic.
it in Occupy Wall Street. We're seeing it in the Arab Spring. And that's our hope. And the number one is keeping the Internet open to be able to do it.
Oh, absolutely. That's why SOPA is so dangerous. Can you give people your website who are listening so that they can go there? I assume it's thrive.com?
No, it's www.thrivemovement.com.
Thrive. All right. The movement is so important. Thrivemovement.com. Yes. We're going to make sure we put a link on to that site as well. We've begun to develop, with the help of some very astute people, including our good friend Jim Turner, the attorney in Washington who's president of Citizens for Health. We've begun to develop a social network for people in the health and food freedom and justice movement. It's called the Free World Network, freeworldnetwork.org, and it just opened yesterday. And it's just the beginning. It's an attempt to make it easier for people to get at our information. Our website has grown to the point where there are thousands of pages on it, and it became very unwieldy for people to get at it. And we began to see that it is social networking that is so powerful. So we're really interested in interfacing with your movement network and with all the other social movement networks that we can, because we believe that health and food freedom and justice are central to all of these efforts to foster a thriving humanity, if I can coin a phrase there.
No, I think what you're saying is so key, and what I said to the people in our community in Santa Cruz when they finally stopped the spraying, I said, they will be back, and one of the gems that will come out of our efforts so far will have been our email list. So I said, keep those email lists, because what we're really doing is creating an electronic global brain that can respond.
Absolutely.
Very rapidly in the future to these sorts of assaults as they occur. And the network that you've already created is a key part of that. And I was on that Free World Network site last night taking a look at it for the first time, and it looks fantastic.
Yeah, it's going to be very good. So much work's got to be done still, but it's coming a long way. That's very interesting. Now, we've talked about a little bit about these threats, and one of the things I've noticed is it seems to me that a number of the people on the inside have taken the attitude that something big is about to happen, that everything that they do now doesn't matter, that they can dump whatever pollutants and toxins they want, because somewhere in the near future, it's all going to change. This is expressed, of course, through the singularity concept and Kurzweil's ideas. And I've noticed that Bill Gates is one of the people who seems to have latched on to that. And it seems to me that the American political class is pretty much of the opinion that there's going to be such a break in the near future that it doesn't matter how much damage they do now. They're not looking at thriving. They seem to be looking only at surviving the moment. And I'm wondering if you feel that we're coming to a head where there's some change, some singularity ahead of us, which will show a real break with the past. Are we at that breaking point? Are we near it?
Well, I think that we are, and as I say in the movie, I think we are at the critical fork in the road in human history, because it's the first time when humanity has had the technological capability to destroy life on Earth as we know it. So it's the most dangerous moment in human history, and at the same time, it's the moment when consciousness actually needs to participate in its own evolution in order to survive. You know, we all kind of woke up as babies, and, you know, we had a body that knew how to beat our heart and pump our lungs and all that kind of stuff. You know, evolution has happened to us, and here we are. But all the evidence that I see indicates that we don't get to continue with the evolution on this planet unless we actually become co-creators of that evolution, because the next level is consciousness. And I think we are approaching a key turning point. And, you know, Bucky Fuller called it utopia or oblivion.
Right. General Burt said when he saw Thrive, he said to me, our intentionality needs to be to thrive. That's exactly what it needs to be.
Exactly. And that lines up with
and he is the master of intentionality.
Whereas the agenda for global domination is exactly counter to the natural life force.
You're right.
That's why I'm confident that it will not succeed. It may be very messy in turning this thing around, and there may be even more suffering than is going on right now. I hope not, but I'm not naive about what it's going to take to kind of break out of this exoskeleton of, you know, fear and centralized control. But the life force is the most powerful thing in the universe, as far as I can tell. And on this planet, the most powerful thing I found is women's protection of the life force.
Absolutely, and Dr. Rima would completely agree with you on that one. I mean, I've heard her say almost those words.
She's a great example of it.
Indeed.
One of the things that we're most excited about with Thrive, as it's now having a global wave of response, is that women are waking up and taking action and getting inspired through this movie in a way that we have not seen before. And that was one of our goals, because, frankly, a lot of the material prior to Thrive that reveals the conspiracy and reveals the assault on our health and our food and our very survival has been so harsh, and it kind of had a male, angry, ranting quality to it, that while I think necessary to play its part in just kind of shaking humanity by the shoulders for a moment and going, wake up! You know, I think now the time has come when the information is so available that what we were really looking for, and my wife Kimberly really helped coach me on as director of the film,
right,
is she kept reminding me, come from your confidence about the way out, gently relay the information, and leave the space for people to have their own emotional response rather than filling it with your own. And that has turned out to be a really powerful breakthrough, because women from all over the world are saying, finally, I wanted to sit through this film. I want to give it to my teenage kids. I want to give it to my lady friends and so forth. And in my experience, just like with the spray movement here, once the women and mothers woke up to it, you know, it was a very short amount of time before they had to stop spraying. Because when women start protecting their kids, I don't think there's anything more powerful. And you know, we guys can assist with our warrior spirit in that, but we really need to do it hand in hand, and that's finally happening.
Very interesting. Well, so we're going forward this year. One of our purposes on Sunday the 8th is going to be to discuss the prime issues, the most important issues going forward, and what we can do to affect them. What would your advice be to our mouse warriors, the people who are going to click on their computer mice and send messages to decision makers, who are going to listen to what Dr. Rima recommends? What is your advice to all of us? What should we be focusing on in this year 2012?
Well, I recognize that I am what Buckminster Fuller called a comprehensivist. I just tend to think in terms of the whole system. So we developed this sector navigator that we use as a navigation tool both in the film and on the website, where we've got these 12 spheres around one. And what I recommend to people as they're looking to see what's the highest leveraged way that they can apply their energy is I recommend that they look at two things. One, really three things. First of all, ask yourself, what is your purpose in life, and write it down. It may change over time. It probably will. But see, it's not a matter of what you're going to make up. It's a matter of discovering what's already true for you inside. So that's your fundamental kind of compass, your true north. Then secondly, look at our sector navigator and look and see what excites you most. Is it spirituality? Is it the environment? Is it economics? Is it education? Or in your case, is it health? And so that you know where you want to focus your efforts. And then the third part in the plan is ask yourself, which level are you most drawn to? Are you an immediate needs person where you want to go out and, like Doctors Without Borders, and actually provide medical service on the ground where they don't have it, or go work in a soup kitchen where you're actually feeding people who are starving? That's level one, is immediate needs. Or are you someone who is more drawn towards systemic change? In other words, looking at the politics, looking at the economics, looking at the social organization to see what is it about our system that is having people starving, that is having people not have access to health care, and then be instrumental in the organization that it takes to change that system. So that's level two, is systemic change. And the final level, level three, is the consciousness shift. Because everything that we do comes out of our consciousness. The impulse and the thought occurs before the action takes place.
That's right.
So it may be that your specialty is actually investigating what is it in our consciousness that is getting in our way, or that can break us through. Because with those breakthroughs, then those worldview breakthroughs change the systems, which then start improving the immediate needs situation. So if you identify what area you're most interested in and what level you're most drawn to, where those two meet, that's where I recommend individuals start to apply their action. And in our What Can I Do section of the website, we've got overarching strategies for each of the sectors, and then our top 10 and other recommended actions that an individual can take in their daily life that don't take a lot of money and time, that you can get started on right away if you're not already. So I recommend that people check that out.
Fantastic. And that website, the
Natural Solutions Foundation is a perfect example of an organization which has taken on a particular area like health, which touches into environment, and it touches into governance and into justice and relations, economics, all of that. But with a focus in the health area, one of the reasons why we feature you on our health page is that you are a prototype for the sort of organization that people can do, that gets to the truth, looks to see what's going on behind the scenes that's keeping us from thriving, uses the internet and real fact-based persuasion to argue for people getting involved, and then goes out and actually puts their feet on the ground and at these different codex conferences and so forth to get it done. So for me personally in life, I am tremendously relieved in terms of my attitude and my stress to know that in each of these areas there are already fantastic people and organizations like your own who are being active and finding the same problems and how they overlap, but also finding the same principles, the principles of healthy living systems by which we can design and create the new systems that can have us all thriving.
Fantastic. You know, folks, this is the Dr. Rima Reports with your co-host Ralph Fusatola, interviewing Foster Gamble, producer of the movie Thrive. The website he's talking about is thrivemovement.com, and it has on it this concept of dividing our activities into these 12 areas and then being active in the area that we're most comfortable in. That's a great concept. You know, a great philosopher, great 20th century philosopher, Ludwig von Mises, said that all human action is predicated on dissatisfaction. And certainly there is much to be dissatisfied in the way the world is operating right now. And we, as we are all in survival mode, but it was what you've told us is that we can go from merely surviving to something much better, and that is to thriving, and that is fantastic. We were hoping to have Dr. Rima on with us. Of course, she will be on the program on the 8th when we broadcast this interview, but it looks as though she's still offline. Dr. Rima and General Byrd are on their way from the Valley of the Moon Eco Demonstration Project in Panama up here to the northeast corner of the United States for our annual trustees meeting and actually semi-annual trustees meeting and this event that we're having on Sunday. We are looking forward to having everyone's comments about how we go forward to achieve this state of thriving. And I'm wondering if Foster, if you can tell us a little bit about some of the people who are on the movie and what some of their views might have been on this issue of where do we go, how do we move forward into a world in which our species can thrive, in which the entire plant and animal world on this planet can thrive.
Well, one of the things that I think was most exciting about the movie and ended up being one of the more powerful aspects is that with my comprehensivist approach, I have been kind of nicknamed the question guy ever since I was in elementary school. I love to ask people with some real experience the deepest questions that I can and then see how it fits together with the answers of other people. And oftentimes, especially when they disagree, because then I have to look for my own deeper truth in the disagreement. So I interviewed for the film scientists and economists and whistleblowers and near-death survivors and business people and health advocates, and doctors, and former gang members, and just a whole different spectrum. There are people like John Robbins in health, and Deepak Chopra in consciousness, Vandana Shiva and Satish Kumar in the whole environmental area. John Gatto is one of the leading authorities that I've found on what's really gone on that's taken over our school system and what's needed for an actual vibrant educational opportunity for every person. And, I interviewed in science Elizabeth Saturis and Nassim Haramein and Dwayne Elgin and Ashok Gangadine, the philosopher, Barbara Marx Hubbard, a futurist, as well as people like David Icke, who's one of the leading researchers for the last 25 years in terms of what's really going on in the realm of covert agendas behind the scenes that's getting in the way of people thriving.
Right. And this identification of what is getting in the way, that is such an important thing. And one of the things we should be doing, folks, is really paying attention to what is it that's getting in the way. What are we dissatisfied with that we need to set aside so that we can, in fact, do what we are naturally capable of doing, namely thriving. And, of course, Natural Solutions Foundation finds its focus on health and food, freedom and justice, looking at those 4 technologies that General Byrd identified for us and Dr. Rima identified for us as the genomocidal technologies of ionizing radiation, of course, nuclear power, vaccinations with their toxins and the assault on the immune system and on the neurological system, which the establishment wants to pretend is not happening. And, of course, the other environmental and drug toxins. And finally, the GMOs with their, as Dr. Rima says, novel proteins for which the human immune system has no experience. These technologies, which all violate the precautionary principle, are also technologies that only exist because the powers that want to be. We used to say the powers that be, but Dr. Rima has corrected us on that. It's the powers that want to be. It's these technologies that they are fostering in a very strange way. For example, under our system of market capitalism, insofar as it may or may not exist, publicly traded companies are not allowed to invest in uninsurable risks. They can't take shareholders' money and just put them into uninsurable risk. 2 of those 4 technologies, 2 of them are literally uninsurable risks. There's no insurance company that will write a policy for damage from a nuclear reactor. There is no insurance company that will insure a drug company, a doctor, a nurse, a parent against vaccine harm. These are uninsurable risks. And the only way those industries even exist is because the Congress of the United States took away from us our right to redress for the foreseeable harms that these technologies can cause. Now, I don't know where in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution it says that Congress has the power to do that to us, but certainly they've done it, and until we return to a constitutional republic, we're going to have to live with that fact. But it's important to note that these are not natural events. It is not natural that these things should exist. They're not part of the thriving of humanity. They are, in fact, part of the distortion, which is caused by people with more power than sense. I'm sorry to say. But so that's where our take is from. That's the unifying view that we bring to this issue, is that we see these technologies as doing something to everyone. And of course what they're doing is they're damaging us chemically. They're causing the neurological and other damage that prevents us from thriving. Consider a culture in which...
follow up on that for a second, Ralph, because I think it is a really key point that you're making. And I think one of the reasons, in my observation, that your group has been so effective in this is that, in a sense, you've brought together a number of sectors already in the experience of what I call the Three Musketeers, you and Bert and Rima. Bert comes in with his military background, Rima with her medical background, and you with your law background, and can see from those different perspectives, and bringing that together, you have the sophistication to realize that when we're looking at mandatory fluoride in our water,
right,
and then aspartame in our food and MSGs, and then chemtrails coming down from the sky, GMOs in the food, and radiation increasing everywhere, you've got enough sophistication to stand back and go, this is not just incompetence. This is not coincidence. What really are the odds? And if it's not, then if somebody's actually doing this to us, first of all, it's horrible to contemplate, but it's necessary. If we're being attacked, sure, it's hard news, but it's, as we say in the movie, it's like having a tough but treatable disease. You better find out if you're going to have a chance to treat it.
Exactly.
And I really respect that you guys have been willing to think critically about how all this fits together into a picture that is not only the dumbing down and the drugging out, but actually the culling, the elimination, the intentional making sick and eliminating a lot of people on this planet. And for our team, I was aware of this for quite a while, and my wife was really investigated and came to the same conclusion. But for our team, it was far and away the hardest for our team to face and then to integrate, was that awareness. And what I've seen is that just simply anybody who's willing to keep doing the homework, do the reading, look at the news, watch the DVDs and so forth that actually present the facts, sooner or later people are going to realize this is not random. World War III is already underway, primarily economically and through attacking our health. And unless we hear the Paul Reveres like you and Thrive and so many other good people who are waking up and calling out about this now, unless we wake up in a critical mass and everybody decides to take a stand for our lives on this, then we are truly in a lethal situation and with a lot of heads in the sand. So the time has come, and as unpleasant as it is, what we're finding is that so many millions of people are becoming hopeful once they get how bad that agenda is. Then it's like the confusion goes away. The fog lifts, and now we can start taking the highly leveraged actions that are commensurate with the problem that we're facing. So that's what makes me optimistic. Not that it's not a nasty agenda or that it's going to be an easy turnaround, but I know that we outnumber the people actually perpetrating this agenda by more than 1,000,000 to 1. So as people wake up and withdraw their support in the same way Gandhi and King did from these corporations, these banks, these pharmaceutical companies and so forth who are actually perpetrating these agenda, they will come down. The strength of a pyramid is in its base, not in its capstone. So those systems are starting to crumble as Occupy is spreading the word, and as Anonymous is keeping the internet open, and as people are willing to encounter this information and take action.
That's fantastic, and that's absolutely what's happening. We've been watching it occur. We've been seeing it build. Just in the past month, we've seen a really big uptick in our email list, which always tells us that people are becoming more concerned and they're paying more attention.
Yeah.
This is, of course, an election year coming up, and so a lot of the public's attention will be focused. We're just really excited by the type of responses we get from people, by our understanding now that social networking, that bringing all these people together is powerful. It's not people, the three of us, Rima, Bert, myself, our executive director, Gail, my wife, Kathy, who handles the Dr. Labo emails. It's not just us, these 5 or 6 people, but it's really this social network of hundreds of thousands of people who are allowing us the resources to do these things that we would otherwise want to do but could not do. It's really massing, as General Burt says, it's massing the resources to make it happen, and it seems to be actually happening. The type of response people have given to Thrive shows that people are ready to become awake. And once you're awake, you have to act.
So much
How can you do anything else once you're awake but acting?
It's the first global kind of revolution, and it's not based on somebody's charisma or personality. Right. It's not based on some big organization or based on a lot of money. It's actually based on truth. It's actually based on what some people like yourselves are saying that is ringing true with people, especially young people who are less bought into old systems, where something rings true and it makes sense, and people realize that they are actually the heroes in their own life story. And it's as easy as responding to your own inner guidance and your own logic of what's true, and then deciding what is my calling. What can I actually stand up and do, and realizing I'm going to be a lot more powerful if I hook in my neighbors and find out who wants to collaborate, and then find out what organizations are doing powerful actions, and then as those are linking together, when I picture your board meeting coming up this weekend, you're particularly focused in the health, food, and justice areas, and those are huge, and they relate to so many other areas of people who are following your work and helping you with your work and being inspired to take your work out there. But I think that's a lot of the challenge now for us as individuals and organizations, is to find our calling and really be good at that, but at the same time stay linked with how it fits in with the larger systems and with the people and organizations who are in those larger systems, because this is the neural network that will actually set us free.
Yes, absolutely. And the Earth is beginning to develop its own neural network for certain. This is, folks, the Dr. Rima Reports. This is your co-host, Ralph Fusatola, interviewing Foster Gamble, producer of the movie Thrive. You are probably listening to this either broadcast or on the archives over our website, Health Freedom Portal, portal.org, where we have the widget set up so you can listen and watch. And while you're listening to Foster, there will be people who will be Skyping notes back and forth or chatting notes back and forth. This discussion is happening on January 5th. That part of the discussion will happen on the 8th as we use these electronic media to communicate in every way we can. Foster, there are a number of things we could talk about now, and we have you for an hour. We want to use that hour because there's so much that you can help us understand. Where would you like to go? What would you like to talk about next?
Well, I appreciate your asking, because I was actually feeling a strong urge to ask you a question so that we can better inform our Thrive networks. A lot of people are going to be listening to this interview in our networks, and what I find as I talk to people now all over the country and around the world is that one of the areas that people are least informed about is the whole Codex Alimentarius. So I'd like to ask you to just take a couple of minutes to help inform me and our network as to the status of the whole Codex agenda and what people in our networks might be able to do to help us keep access to clean, healthy food and to natural supplements.
Good. All right. I'd be happy to do so. Codex Alimentarius, of course, is Latin for food code. The food code was originally part of the Napoleonic Code. So we're talking now about a legal code as opposed to the common law. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire developed further the Codex because, of course, there were many different nationalities within the empire, and they had to trade food back and forth across languages and across internal borders. And so they began to develop this concept of a food code that would allow and promote the movement of food across borders. After World War II, a group of Europeans, and unfortunately it included some German pharmaceutical executives who had spent some time in Allied internment camps after the war, but a group of individuals convinced the World Health Organization and the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, two primary agencies of the UN, independent agencies of the UN, that they ought to work together on taking the old European idea of the food code and making it into a world food code. And so the statute of Codex Alimentarius as an international organization was created. And that statute has two purposes that it sets forth. One is to promote international food trade, and the other is to promote the safety of food. And we believe that what has happened to Codex, which started with such great promise to help open up world food trade, to promote and help people thrive, is that it got taken over, if you will, by some of the worst elements in the international community, some of the biggest of the bigs. And so today, when you go to Codex meetings, you find that the American delegation always includes people from those companies that we've all come to know about, companies like Monsanto, with its goal of controlling all the seeds on Earth, and those people, and whenever they want, and whatever their counterparts in Europe want, they more or less get. And what do they get? They get all sorts of restrictions and all sorts of regulations on international food trade, which tends to reduce the availability of good, wholesome food to people. And they do it within the context of pseudoscience. And so, for example, they've been debating daily reference amounts for nutrients. And in each case, when they come up with a daily reference amount for a nutrient, it's always been just shy of being enough of that nutrient to avoid the classical deficiency disease. So, for example, 60 milligrams of vitamin C a day, barely enough to avoid scurvy is the daily reference. The human body needs several grams of vitamin C a day for thriving. For example, the daily reference amount for women for calcium is 1 gram. You need 1.2 grams to avoid osteoporosis if you're a woman. Again, if you want to thrive, you need more than this international bureaucracy thinks ought to be the daily reference. And so it goes on with nutrient after nutrient after nutrient, except for one non-nutrient, which is somehow on that list, and it's fluoride. And for fluoride, 4 grams a day of this dangerous neurotoxin. But don't worry, if you're worried about fluoride in your water, soon enough there's going to be lithium in the water if certain people have their way. Make sure the population is nice and relaxed. So what does Codex do? Codex adopts standards, and the standards define what a food is. They'll define cheddar cheese, or they'll define some other food. And that definition becomes the definition for international trade. They also issue guidelines. And the guidelines are things such as the vitamin and mineral guideline under which they are promulgating these daily amounts, daily reference amounts which will turn into daily maximums, and in fact in some countries already have become the maximum allowed in any vitamin product. So that's one of the things they do. They also propagandize for themselves. And Dr. Rima brilliantly, a couple of years ago, walked through their exhibit in the hall of the FAO building in Rome, a building that was built by Benito Mussolini, by the way, and has the grandness that one expects from that sort of concept. And she goes through that with her video camera, and she's looking at these luscious 12-foot-high photos of food, and she's panning on the words, and she's at the same time deconstructing what's really going on in Codex. And what's really going on is the world globalist agenda. What's really going on is degrading food to the point where it no longer supports health. In fact, both WHO and FAO a couple of years ago told Codex on its 46th anniversary that it has failed to meet its obligations. And the same two organizations issued a very important report around the same time where they identified the non-communicable diseases of mal and undernutrition. And we all know what they are. They are cancer and diabetes and heart disease and obesity. These diseases that plague the developed world and are beginning to plague the rest of the world as well. And they showed that these are the diseases that can be prevented by wholesome food, the very same wholesome food that Codex Alimentarius avoids. Final example of what Codex means.
To this, what can people do to help stop the takeover of our food and supplements?
Well, it just so happens that Natural Solutions, we do more at Natural Solutions Foundation than just identify the problems. We try to bring the natural solutions to people. And we developed, with Jim Turner of Citizens for Health, what we call the Codex two-step. And it turns out that Codex's guidelines are not mandatory. It turns out that the way Codex is enforced is not through Codex, but rather through the World Trade Organization. And the World Trade Organization says that in any trade dispute between countries, Codex's standards and guidelines shall be presumed to be the law between the parties. A presumption is not a necessity. And in fact, 3 times the WTO has refused to adopt Codex as the law between the parties, but only as the presumed law. And so a country can, lawfully, adopt its own guidelines based on science and adopt its own law based on those guidelines. And once it's done that, its law and guidelines stand on an equal footing with Codex's law and guidelines, and the World Trade Organization cannot impose sanctions, which means countries can, in fact, prevent GMO foods from entering the country. They can, in fact, offer foods that are of a higher standard to the rest of the world, and the rest of the world needs to accept those foods. That's really what the Codex two-step is about. And interestingly enough, the Chinese understand, because over and over again, whenever Codex makes one of its decisions, the Chinese delegate stands up and says, the People's Republic of China considers this matter to be within the national purview of China, which means we are adopting our own rules. So they understand that. There are ways around it. A number of nations have come together on that. They are what we call the health-conscious nations. Then we communicate with their Codex delegations, and they've done some interesting things. For example, there was an attempt to come up with a list of allowed ingredients for baby formula. And, of course, one of the ingredients being offered was fluoride in large amounts. And there was a rebellion led by the Africans, fostered by Rima and Bert, who, by the way, whenever they show up at Codex meetings, are met by armed guards and kept in the upper balcony, which is good. It gives us a good place to make photos, But so they revolted, and since Codex acts by consensus, there was no consensus to include fluoride, and so it was not included. Yep. But at the very end of that meeting, in the last 30 seconds of the meeting, the U.S. doctor delegate head gets up, Dr. Schneeman, who, by the way, received our Dr. Mengele Award that year. Dr. Schneeman gets up and says, Madam Chairwoman, a point of information. Just because we didn't allow fluoride in formula for healthy babies, that doesn't mean that we can't put it in formulas for sick babies. And the chairwoman looks around the room and says, seeing no opposition, as people are jumping up and screaming all over the room, seeing no opposition, so ordered, meeting adjourned, bang. That's the way Codex operates, folks. And that's why Codex Alimentarius is not good.
That people can sign up on as
yes.
they start to join in against this?
Yes. We have a number of petitions that touch on Codex. And we have a page on our website that links to all of those current action items where we can educate decision makers. And that page is accessible from the main page, accessible from the new network, and it also has one of those tiny URLs that we like to use, tinyurl.com/pushbackhere. And you put that in and you'll get to the page that has all of our action items, and at least the most current action items. And we keep on sending messages to Congress. One of the things we're really working on now is supporting Dennis Kucinich's bill to require labeling of GMOs. Currently, the FDA's position is that GMOs don't have to be labeled because they are presumed to be safe, and it's illegal to label your product GMO-free. The law that Dennis Kucinich offers would change all that. We have an action item supporting it. For example, among the greatest heroes in the health and food freedom and justice world are the raw milk freedom riders, who are doing just what Gandhi did when he walked to the ocean to pan for his own salt in violation of the British Empire's salt monopoly. They're doing the same thing. They take milk, raw milk, from farmers in Pennsylvania, for example, a few weeks ago, and they brought it across state lines in violation of the FDA's rules, and they served it to people on the steps of the FDA headquarters in Maryland. FDA issued a statement that day saying, oh, we have to maintain the ban. And then 2 days later they said, but we don't intend to enforce that ban against anyone just merely taking raw milk across state lines for their own personal use. So we see how even that little bit of pushback pushes back. Ron Paul...
I want to encourage listeners to remember how powerful you can be just by signing petitions in all these different areas, and at the same time not to settle for just clicking on petitions on your computer.
Right.
You're not actually out meeting people, talking with people, and organizing, taking some sorts of actions. Then there's probably more that you can do, and it'll be more fulfilling when you do.
Right, that action and the photos.
I highly recommend in other areas that people go to our solutions section of the thrivemovement.com website and look under the What Can I Do section. And there we've got a top 10 recommended individual actions that you can take that don't take much time or money to do. You just do them in your daily life, like getting informed and speaking up and connecting with others, and banking in your local community so that money doesn't get sucked out of your community. It's in New York or London overnight while your community is drying up of capital.
Right.
Joining movements to audit and end the Federal Reserve.
Right.
Supporting organic, non-GMO farming. Election and campaign finance reform. Advocating for renewable energy. These are all things that you can do that don't take a lot of time or money and can be very, very effective. When you start realizing that you're connecting into these networks who are taking highly leveraged action, like Natural Solutions Foundation is doing, there's this incredible feeling of empowerment that is really unusual for our culture, frankly. So many people feel like, well, geez, okay, there's an agenda, but they've already got all the military, they've got all the money. What can a little person like me do? Well, I'm very clear on who people are. When I'm talking to a human being, every single one of them is someone who won a swimming race of between 60 and 600 million sperm.
How true.
Every single one of you had the most intention in that swimming race to be the first one to the egg. So I never want to entertain
we're all the winners.
The notion that someone is helpless.
What
now,
a great
with
concept.
The internet and the understanding that we're getting of where to put our actions, we can be really powerful without it taking a lot of time and money, which, frankly, most people don't have these days, but it doesn't mean we can't do it if we work together.
Absolutely. And that's fantastic. One of the other things on that list of action items is our support for Dr. Paul's raw milk freedom bill. And we think that these pushback actions do help. It's important to make sure that every member of Congress knows that we want them to become co-sponsors of laws that will help us thrive. Very important. But you're right, so important to act on a local level. For example, here in our community, we have groups of people that meet in various ways to try to work on some of these social problems. It's very important to think globally, act locally, to be part of networks that go on, that act on all sorts of levels. And we're so happy that we can be part of the network, the social network that Thrive has become emblematic of. Yeah. And that's really good.
While you're having your board meeting coming up this weekend, I was invited recently to a meeting up in Marin County in Northern California, where a lot of people who've become very enthusiastic supporters of Thrive are having another screening, but then followed by a 4-hour meeting, which is really they're naming taking Thrive to the next level, and
that's
it's going to be similar to what you're talking about brainstorming. Okay, what are the most effective actions that we can take in these various areas, and creating local task forces, and then connecting with other groups nationwide and worldwide. And this is starting to happen. I happen to be going to this one because it's nearby. But we're getting letters, emails and Facebook entries and so forth from all different cities and from all different countries and from the Occupy groups and so forth, who are using the tools that we've provided in the movie and the website to help them organize. And that's exactly what we intended. And then what we encourage people to do is be active locally, be creative, create your own initiatives. But then if you're inclined to, inform us, write into info@thrivemovement.com and inform us as to what you're doing, and then what's working and what's not working. And we will be posting and promoting those conversations so that we can simply help facilitate a global self-creating movement, not a centralized, we're going to tell you what to do movement, but we're going to support you, we're going to give you all the tools that we can, and support you with internet communications, so that we can really have a decentralized, honest global movement based on the principles of health and of freedom and justice. And that is happening, and that's what gets me up in the morning.
That's fantastic.
I feel now that we can turn this thing around is really exciting.
It is very exciting. Foster, we've been speaking for almost an hour. It's gone very quickly. It's been very exciting. I don't want to finish the interview without giving you a chance to mention that website again and give us your final thoughts. Any message you have for Rima and Bert, who will be probably listening to this for the first time on Sunday when we have our meeting. I turn it over to you to wrap us up.
Great. Well, first of all, it's just, as I said, it's been such a thrill to be a part of this community and in this conversation. But I am a part of your extended community and delighted to have Thrive Movement linked up with the amazing work that you're doing. I was so thrilled to be able to be present. I ran a company in Silicon Valley where we did brainwave biofeedback trainings and explorations, and Rima and Bert came as clients to the training and met there. And I was able to witness the sparks of recognition that happened between the two of them. And frankly, I have not been able to see them in person since then. And I think that was probably 1990 or something like that. But I've enjoyed following the progress of their wonderful relationship and the remarkable work in the world that all of you have been doing for the last couple of decades.
Fantastic.
But anyway, in terms of my final message, I would simply say that remember who we are, that we are the impulse to thrive, and that is what nature wants. It's what the universe wants more than anything else, is for us to thrive, to grow more conscious, to love each other more thoroughly and explore the cosmos. And we've got everything we need already on this planet. We've got organic food. We've got plenty of water if we can keep it clean. We've got free energy technologies already. we've got an understanding of voluntary association and true liberty that can have this world free and safe and thriving. So I encourage people to relax and get active. In other words, enjoy the fact that you're the star of your own movie. Pick your favorite soundtrack and realize that when you get up in the morning, you're actually a key part of creating a world where everyone can thrive. We're doing our part. Natural Solution Foundation is doing your part. And as we come together to stand up for our lives, I'm really confident that we can do this. So, good luck, and I'll meet you out there on the road.
We'll no doubt meet you on the road, Foster. It's been wonderful. We're going to be in California in February. Dr. Rima and General Burt have a conference they're going to. I'm meeting up with them, and we're going to be meeting Father Godfrey, the mentor of the Songhai community. A few other things going on. Maybe we'll find some way to meet up with you while we're out there.
Well, that would be wonderful. And meanwhile, I send my love and great gratitude to each of you and for the work that you're doing in the world.
Many blessings, Foster. Your work has been an inspiration and will continue to be an inspiration to us all. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks a lot, Ralph.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Well, folks, that was Foster Gamble, the producer of Thrive, and he was telling us about his movie and about his movement, thrivemovement.com. We are so happy to have him as the keynote speaker at the 3rd Annual War Council of the Natural Solutions Foundation. Having said all that, I will now turn the proceedings over to our esteemed President, General Burt, and we will continue with the meeting. Thank you all for listening.